What if I told you that some of the greatest suffering in your life came not from what people took from you, but from what you freely handed them? There are things that, once given away, are almost impossible to recover. Your peace, your dignity, your silence, your soul. And the tragedy is this: many people will ask for them with a smile. Your peace is one of the most valuable things you will ever possess, yet most people do not realize its importance until they lose it. Peace is not simply the absence of noise or conflict. It is the quiet stability within your mind when the world around you becomes uncertain. It is the ability to sleep at night without replaying conversations in your head. It is the freedom to wake up without anxiety tightening around your chest. Real peace is emotional clarity. It is the feeling of being deeply connected to yourself without constantly seeking approval, validation, or permission from others. The tragedy is that many people spend years building inner peace, only to hand it away to individuals who never earned the right to touch it. Some people enter your life carrying storms within them. They are restless, dissatisfied, bitter, manipulative, or emotionally chaotic, and instead of healing themselves, they unconsciously try to transfer that chaos into the lives of others. They criticize constantly, create unnecessary drama, provoke emotional reactions, and leave confusion wherever they go. In the beginning, you may believe that patience, understanding, and compassion will eventually calm them. You may convince yourself that if you love them harder, support them longer, or sacrifice more of your emotional energy, things will improve. But there are people who do not seek peace. They seek control, attention, and emotional dominance because conflict has become familiar to them. And the more access you give them to your emotions, the more exhausted you become. Many good-hearted people are taught from childhood to prioritize everyone else before themselves. They are praised for being selfless, available, forgiving, and endlessly accommodating. Over time, they begin to believe that protecting their own peace is selfish. So they tolerate disrespect to avoid confrontation. They answer every call even when emotionally drained. They allow toxic conversations to continue because they fear appearing rude. They keep giving chances to people who repeatedly destroy their emotional stability. Slowly, without noticing it, they become prisoners of other people's emotional instability. Their minds become crowded with stress that does not belong to them. Their days become controlled by the moods, opinions, and behaviors of others. What makes this even more dangerous is that chaos rarely arrives loudly in the beginning. It often disguises itself as love, friendship, loyalty, or concern. Some people will demand constant access to your attention and call it closeness. Others will criticize your decisions and call it honesty. Some will invade your boundaries and claim they are only trying to help. Little by little, your emotional space becomes occupied by tension, guilt, and pressure. You stop feeling calm in your own life. You begin overthinking every word you say. You start carrying emotional fatigue everywhere you go, even into moments that should feel joyful, and eventually you realize you are surviving emotionally instead of living peacefully. Protecting your peace requires courage because not everyone will understand your boundaries. When you stop entertaining negativity, some people will accuse you of changing. When you refuse to engage in arguments, others may call you distant or cold. When you begin choosing silence over chaos, certain individuals will become uncomfortable because they benefited from your emotional exhaustion. But maturity teaches you that not every battle deserves your attention, not every opinion deserves your reaction, and not every person deserves unlimited access to your mind and emotions. There is immense strength in learning to walk away from environments that constantly disturb your spirit. Sometimes peace requires distance from people you once loved deeply. Sometimes it requires saying no without guilt. Sometimes it means accepting that you cannot heal people who refuse to heal themselves. You are not responsible for carrying the emotional weight of every broken person who enters your life. Compassion should never require self-destruction. The moment your kindness begins damaging your mental and emotional well-being, it stops being healthy and becomes sacrifice. A peaceful life is built through intentional choices. It is built by protecting your energy, choosing your relationships carefully, and refusing to allow negativity to dominate your inner world. The people closest to you should bring clarity, not confusion. They should inspire calmness, not constant emotional tension. Your home, your relationships, your conversations, and your daily experiences should not feel like emotional battlefields where you are constantly defending your sanity. Peace is not weakness. Peace is power under control. It is wisdom that no longer seeks validation through conflict. It is emotional discipline strong enough to walk away from anything that repeatedly steals your joy, your clarity, and your sense of self. Self-respect is the invisible foundation of a person's entire life. It shapes the way you speak, the way you carry yourself, the standards you accept, and the relationships you allow into your world. Without self-respect, even love becomes painful because you begin accepting things that slowly destroy your spirit. Many people believe confidence comes from achievements, appearance, status, or recognition from others, but true confidence is born from the quiet decision to honor yourself even when doing so feels uncomfortable. It is the ability to say, I will not betray my dignity just to keep someone close to me. Unfortunately, countless people spend years sacrificing their self-respect in exchange for temporary affection, validation, or fear of abandonment. One of the saddest realities of human behavior is that some people will test how much disrespect you are willing to tolerate before they decide how to treat you. The moment they realize you are afraid to lose them, the balance changes. They begin speaking to you carelessly. They dismiss your feelings. They manipulate your emotions. They expect forgiveness without accountability. They make you feel guilty for having needs, boundaries, or opinions. And because you fear conflict or rejection, you remain silent even when something inside you feels wounded. Over time, that silence becomes dangerous because every moment you tolerate disrespect, you send a message to yourself that your dignity matters less than someone else's approval. Many people abandon their self-respect gradually, not suddenly. It begins with small compromises. You ignore words that hurt you because you do not want tension. You excuse behavior that makes you uncomfortable because you hope the person will change. You stay quiet after being humiliated because you fear being alone. You apologize for things that were never your fault simply to restore temporary peace. At first, these sacrifices seem harmless, but eventually they become patterns. And once disrespect becomes normalized, your inner world begins to change. You start doubting your worth. You become anxious about disappointing others. You over-explain yourself constantly because you seek acceptance. You lose the ability to express your emotions honestly because deep inside, you no longer feel emotionally safe. There are relationships where people are only comfortable with you as long as you remain smaller than them. They feel threatened when you speak confidently, establish boundaries, or prioritize your own needs. These individuals often disguise control as love. They may tell you that you are selfish for protecting your time, arrogant for valuing yourself, or difficult for refusing mistreatment. The purpose of this manipulation is simple. They want access to you without respecting you. And many people fall into this trap because they confuse being loved with being needed. But being needed is not the same as being valued. Someone can depend on your loyalty, your patience, your forgiveness, and your emotional labor while still failing to respect your humanity. Self-respect also means refusing to beg for basic decency. A person who truly values you will not require endless sacrifices as proof of your loyalty. They will not repeatedly place you in situations that damage your emotional well-being. They will not make you compete for affection, attention, or importance. Yet many people stay trapped in painful dynamics because they believe enduring suffering demonstrates love. In reality, constantly accepting humiliation does not strengthen relationships. It weakens your identity. Every time you silence your truth to keep someone comfortable, you move further away from yourself. One of the hardest lessons in life is understanding that losing certain people may actually save your self-worth. Not everyone who leaves your life is a loss. Sometimes the departure of disrespectful people creates space for healing, growth, and emotional freedom. There are individuals who only remain in your life because you continue lowering your standards to accommodate them. The moment you begin demanding respect, consistency, honesty, and emotional maturity, they disappear because they were never interested in healthy connection. They were interested in access without responsibility. Protecting your self-respect requires emotional courage because it forces you to disappoint people who benefited from your lack of boundaries. It requires learning to say no without explaining yourself endlessly. It requires accepting temporary loneliness rather than remaining in relationships that slowly destroy your confidence. It means recognizing that your value does not decrease simply because someone failed to appreciate it. The strongest people are not always the loudest or most aggressive. Often, the strongest people are those who quietly walk away from environments where their dignity is repeatedly ignored. They understand that peace purchased through self-betrayal is never real peace, and no relationship is worth the slow destruction of your identity. One of the most exhausting habits people develop is the constant need to explain themselves to everyone around them. They explain their choices, their emotions, their boundaries, their silence, their ambitions, and even their pain. They spend enormous amounts of emotional energy trying to make others understand their intentions because deep inside they fear being misunderstood, rejected, or judged unfairly. But there comes a point in life where wisdom teaches a painful truth. Not everyone genuinely wants to understand you. Some people ask questions not because they seek clarity, but because they seek control, conflict, or an opportunity to diminish your confidence. And the more you try to justify yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you, the more emotionally drained you become. Many people live trapped in a cycle of endless explanation because they were conditioned to believe their worth depends on approval. From an early age, they learn to defend every decision to avoid criticism. They learn to over-explain their feelings so others would not become angry. They learn to seek permission before honoring their own needs. As adults, this conditioning follows them into every relationship. They feel guilty for saying no without providing a detailed reason. They feel uncomfortable setting boundaries unless they can convince everyone that their decision is reasonable. They believe they must constantly prove they are good, honest, loyal, or deserving of respect. Over time, this creates emotional exhaustion because life becomes a courtroom where they are permanently defending themselves against judgment. The reality is that people often interpret you according to their own emotional limitations, insecurities, experiences, and beliefs. A jealous person may see your confidence as arrogance. A manipulative person may call your boundaries selfishness. An emotionally unavailable person may label your honesty as dramatic. Someone who benefits from your silence may become uncomfortable when you begin expressing your truth. No amount of explanation can force self-awareness into a person who refuses to look beyond their own perspective. Yet many individuals continue wasting years trying to change the opinions of people who have already decided how they want to see them. There is also a hidden danger in over-explaining yourself constantly. The more you justify your choices, the more power you unconsciously hand to others over your identity. You begin treating your personal decisions as if they require public approval. Instead of living according to your values, you start shaping your behavior around avoiding criticism. Slowly, authenticity disappears. Your words become cautious. Your actions become filtered. Your confidence weakens because you are no longer acting from inner certainty. You are reacting to the fear of being misunderstood. And eventually, you lose touch with your own instincts because your attention becomes consumed by managing other people's opinions. Some conversations are not meant to create understanding. They are designed to keep you emotionally trapped. There are people who intentionally twist your words, question your motives, or repeatedly force you into defensive positions because they enjoy the emotional power it gives them. No matter how calmly or clearly you explain yourself, they continue finding new ways to criticize, doubt, or invalidate you. This is because the issue was never your explanation. The issue was their unwillingness to see you fairly. Trying endlessly to gain understanding from emotionally manipulative people is like pouring water into a container with no bottom. No matter how much effort you give, nothing changes. Maturity teaches you that not every accusation deserves a response, not every misunderstanding requires correction, and not every opinion carries enough value to deserve your emotional attention. Sometimes silence protects your peace more effectively than any explanation ever could. Silence is not weakness. Often it is emotional intelligence. It is recognizing that your energy is too valuable to waste on endless attempts to defend your humanity to people committed to doubting it. There is strength in allowing people to misunderstand you while remaining secure in your truth. There is freedom in no longer feeling responsible for controlling every perception others form about you. The healthiest relationships in life are built on mutual trust, emotional safety, and genuine communication, not constant self-defense. When people truly care about you, they do not force you to endlessly justify your feelings, intentions, or boundaries. They seek understanding instead of conflict. They listen without immediately searching for flaws in your words. They respect your perspective even when they disagree. In emotionally healthy connections, you feel heard rather than interrogated. You feel accepted rather than constantly evaluated. Learning to stop over-explaining yourself does not mean becoming cold, arrogant, or emotionally unavailable. It means developing enough self-respect to understand that your existence does not require universal approval. It means recognizing that your peace matters more than winning every misunderstanding. It means accepting that some people will judge you no matter how sincere, kind, or honest you are. And most importantly, it means trusting yourself enough to make decisions without constantly seeking permission from those who do not carry the responsibility of living your life. One of the greatest mistakes people make in life is allowing temporary individuals to influence permanent decisions. Human beings are emotional creatures, and when attachment becomes strong, logic often becomes weak. People begin building their futures around relationships, promises, and connections that were never stable enough to carry such weight. They rearrange their dreams for people who are uncertain about their own direction. They sacrifice opportunities, silence ambitions, and abandon personal growth because they are emotionally invested in someone they believe will remain forever. But one of the harshest realities of life is that not everyone who walks beside you is meant to stay beside you. Some people arrive only for a season, yet the damage begins when you treat temporary company as permanent destiny. Many individuals speak beautifully about commitment while lacking the emotional maturity required to sustain it. Words are easy, promises are easy, grand visions of the future are easy when there is no responsibility attached to them. But true commitment reveals itself through consistency, sacrifice, emotional accountability, and long-term effort. Unfortunately, many people confuse emotional intensity with reliability. Someone may make you feel deeply desired, understood, or emotionally connected in the present moment, but that does not automatically mean they are capable of building a healthy future with you. Feelings can be powerful and still unstable. Attraction can be real and still temporary. And when people fail to recognize this distinction, they begin placing their entire future into the hands of emotionally inconsistent individuals. There are people who enjoy the comfort of your presence but are unwilling to carry the responsibility of truly valuing you. They love your attention, your loyalty, your emotional support, and your availability, but they are uncertain when it comes to building something meaningful and lasting. These individuals often speak in vague promises. They keep you emotionally invested without offering clarity, direction, or stability. They say enough to keep hope alive, but never enough to create real security. As time passes, you begin organizing your life around their uncertainty. Your decisions become dependent on their moods, their plans, and their indecision. Slowly, your future stops belonging to you and starts revolving around someone who may not even know what they truly want. One of the most dangerous things a person can lose is not time, but direction. Temporary people often distract individuals from their deeper purpose. They create emotional confusion that weakens focus and confidence. A person who once had ambition, discipline, and vision suddenly becomes consumed by emotional instability. Their energy shifts away from personal growth and toward maintaining fragile relationships. They spend sleepless nights trying to save connections that continuously drain them. They postpone goals while waiting for someone else to become emotionally ready. They ignore opportunities because they fear outgrowing relationships that no longer support their evolution. And without realizing it, years disappear while they remain emotionally attached to people who were never truly committed to growing alongside them. Another painful reality is that some people secretly benefit from your stagnation. Not everyone is comfortable watching you evolve into your full potential. Certain individuals prefer versions of you that are dependent, uncertain, and easier to control. When you begin becoming more disciplined, ambitious, emotionally independent, or successful, they may subtly discourage your growth. They may criticize your goals, question your decisions, or create emotional distractions that pull your attention away from your future. Some people do not intentionally destroy your progress, but their lack of vision and emotional maturity still becomes an obstacle to your development. And if you remain too emotionally attached to them, you may eventually shrink your dreams to preserve relationships that were never aligned with your purpose. Protecting your future requires discernment. It requires learning to observe actions more carefully than words. Reliable people create stability through consistency. They communicate honestly. They show emotional maturity during difficult moments. They support growth instead of competing with it. They bring clarity rather than confusion. Temporary people, on the other hand, often create emotional highs followed by uncertainty, inconsistency, and emotional exhaustion. Their presence may feel exciting, intense, or comforting at times, but deep inside, there is always instability surrounding them, and no future can be built securely on emotional instability. There is tremendous wisdom in refusing to sacrifice your long-term peace for temporary emotional comfort. Sometimes protecting your future means walking away from people you deeply care about because their presence is no longer aligned with the life you are trying to build. It means choosing discipline over attachment, clarity over confusion, and purpose over emotional dependency. The future is too valuable to place into the hands of people who are unsure whether they even want to remain part of it. Your dreams, your growth, your peace, and your potential deserve protection from anyone whose inconsistency repeatedly forces you to question your worth, your direction, or your ability to become the person you were meant to be. Loneliness is one of the deepest fears many people carry silently throughout their lives. It is not always the fear of physically being alone, but the fear of feeling unseen, emotionally abandoned, or disconnected from others. Because of this fear, countless individuals remain trapped in relationships, friendships, environments, and situations that slowly destroy their spirit. They tolerate disrespect, emotional neglect, manipulation, and constant unhappiness simply because they believe having something unhealthy is better than having nothing at all. What they fail to realize is that loneliness itself is not what damages the human soul the most. The true destruction begins when a person abandons themselves in order to avoid feeling alone. Many people become so desperate for connection that they slowly disconnect from their own identity. They silence their opinions to avoid conflict. They hide their emotions to remain accepted. They suppress their dreams because others do not support them. Over time, they become versions of themselves that feel unfamiliar, exhausted, and emotionally empty. This transformation rarely happens suddenly. It occurs through repeated compromises made out of fear: fear of rejection, fear of abandonment, fear of starting over, fear of sitting alone with their own thoughts. And because these fears feel overwhelming, people begin sacrificing pieces of their soul just to maintain relationships that no longer nourish them emotionally. There are relationships where people feel physically accompanied but spiritually isolated. They spend years beside someone who does not truly understand them, value them, or emotionally protect them. Conversations become shallow. Emotional safety disappears. Affection becomes inconsistent, yet they remain because they have convinced themselves that leaving would feel more painful than staying. What they do not understand is that prolonged emotional emptiness creates wounds far deeper than temporary solitude ever could. A person can survive periods of loneliness and still remain emotionally whole. But when someone continuously betrays their own spirit for the sake of attachment, something inside them begins to fade slowly. One of the saddest things to witness is a person shrinking themselves to fit into spaces where they are not genuinely appreciated. They become quieter, smaller, less expressive, less alive. Their laughter becomes rare. Their confidence weakens, their natural energy disappears because they are constantly monitoring themselves to avoid upsetting others. Instead of growing freely, they begin living cautiously. Every interaction feels emotionally calculated. Every word feels filtered. They lose spontaneity because survival becomes more important than authenticity. This is how people slowly lose connection with their own soul without realizing it, not through one dramatic event, but through years of self-betrayal disguised as loyalty and love. And some people remain in toxic situations because they romanticize suffering. They believe enduring pain proves commitment. They think sacrificing their emotional well-being demonstrates strength. Society often glorifies people who stay loyal no matter how badly they are treated, but loyalty without self-respect becomes self-destruction. Real love should never require you to abandon your emotional health, your dignity, or your sense of identity. Genuine connection allows you to become more fully yourself, not less. Healthy relationships create emotional safety where honesty, individuality, and growth are encouraged rather than punished. Another dangerous aspect of fearing loneliness is that it causes people to settle for emotional crumbs. They accept minimal affection, inconsistent communication, and one-sided effort because they believe it is the best they can receive. Their standards lower gradually because desperation clouds judgment. Instead of asking whether a relationship is healthy, they ask whether it is enough to temporarily fill the emptiness they feel inside. But no external connection can permanently heal a person who has become disconnected from themselves. When people do not value their own inner world, they often attract relationships that mirror that lack of value. There is a powerful difference between being alone and being abandoned by yourself. Solitude can actually become a place of healing, clarity, and emotional restoration. It is within silence that many people rediscover their identity, rebuild their confidence, and reconnect with the parts of themselves they neglected for years. Solitude allows reflection without constant external influence. It teaches emotional independence. It reveals how much energy was previously wasted chasing validation from people incapable of providing genuine love or understanding. Many individuals fear being alone because they have never truly learned how to enjoy their own company. They have spent so much time seeking connection outside themselves that they forgot how to nurture connection within themselves. Protecting your soul requires the courage to walk away from relationships and environments that repeatedly suffocate your spirit. It means accepting temporary loneliness rather than permanent self-betrayal. It means understanding that peace is far more valuable than forced companionship. Some people will never understand your depth, your heart, or your emotional needs, and chasing their approval will only distance you further from yourself. The moment you stop abandoning your truth to keep others comfortable, you begin reclaiming your inner freedom. You stop begging to be chosen because you finally choose yourself. You stop tolerating emotional starvation because you realize your soul deserves nourishment, honesty, respect, and love that does not require the destruction of your identity. There are moments in life when silence feels terrifying. A quiet room, an unanswered message, an empty seat beside you, or the absence of constant attention can make a person feel emotionally exposed. Many people spend their entire lives running from this discomfort because they associate loneliness with failure, rejection, or unworthiness. They fear being alone so deeply that they begin accepting relationships, friendships, and environments that slowly consume their spirit. Instead of asking whether something is healthy, they ask whether it prevents them from feeling abandoned. And in that desperate attempt to escape loneliness, they often sacrifice the most important thing they possess, their authentic self. Human beings naturally crave connection. The desire to be loved, understood, and emotionally close to others is part of human existence. But there is a dangerous difference between healthy connection and emotional dependency. Healthy connection allows two people to grow while remaining true to themselves. Emotional dependency, however, forces people to abandon their identity in order to maintain attachment. Many individuals do not realize when this shift happens because it occurs gradually. They begin changing small things about themselves to keep someone interested. They hide opinions to avoid disagreement. They ignore their intuition when something feels wrong. They tolerate emotional neglect because they fear losing the relationship entirely. Slowly, their personality becomes shaped by survival instead of authenticity. One of the greatest tragedies in life is watching someone become emotionally invisible inside a relationship. Their needs are ignored, their emotions are minimized, their dreams are treated as inconvenient. Yet they remain because they believe loneliness would hurt more than emotional starvation. Over time, they stop expressing themselves honestly because they no longer feel safe being fully seen. They become careful with their words, cautious with their emotions, and disconnected from their own inner truth. What once felt like love eventually becomes emotional imprisonment, but fear keeps them trapped. Fear whispers that leaving means starting over. Fear convinces them that no one else will understand them. Fear tells them that enduring pain is better than facing uncertainty alone. Many people also confuse attention with love. They stay connected to individuals who constantly drain them emotionally because occasional moments of affection create temporary relief from loneliness. A toxic relationship may contain moments of closeness, laughter, intimacy, or emotional intensity, and those moments become addictive because they interrupt the pain. But temporary comfort does not erase long-term damage. Emotional inconsistency creates confusion that weakens self-worth. One day a person feels valued, and the next day they feel ignored or dismissed. This cycle creates emotional dependency because the mind becomes desperate for the return of affection. Instead of building peace, The relationship becomes a constant emotional struggle between hope and disappointment. Another painful reality is that people often betray themselves long before others betray them. Every time a person ignores their own emotional needs to keep someone else satisfied, they create distance between themselves and their soul. Every time they silence their truth to avoid rejection, they weaken their self-respect. Every time they remain in situations that continuously damage their spirit, they teach themselves that their inner peace is less important than external validation. This silent self-betrayal accumulates slowly over years until they no longer recognize the person they have become. They may appear connected to others on the outside while internally feeling empty, exhausted, and emotionally lost. Society often pressures people into believing that being alone is something shameful. People are taught to fear solitude instead of understanding its value. As a result, many rush into unhealthy relationships simply to avoid feeling isolated. But solitude is not the enemy people imagine it to be. In many cases, solitude becomes the place where healing begins. It is in solitude that people rediscover their voice without interruption. It is where they learn what truly matters to them without external pressure shaping their decisions. It is where emotional wounds become visible enough to heal properly instead of being temporarily covered by distraction and unhealthy attachment. A person who becomes comfortable with solitude develops a different kind of emotional strength. They no longer tolerate mistreatment simply because someone offers attention. They stop settling for relationships that drain more than they nourish. They become selective about who enters their emotional world because they understand the value of peace. Loneliness no longer controls their decisions because they discover that being alone with self-respect feels far healthier than being emotionally trapped with someone who constantly damages their spirit. Protecting your soul requires courage because walking away from unhealthy attachment often creates temporary pain. There may be moments of sadness, uncertainty, or emotional withdrawal, but temporary loneliness is survivable. What destroys people slowly is the repeated abandonment of their own truth. Real love should expand your spirit, not suffocate it. Real connection should strengthen your identity, not erase it. The people who truly belong in your life will never require you to become smaller, quieter, weaker, or emotionally disconnected just to keep them close.